Okay, hey John, hey Mike.
Oh, there we are, Kim.
Now I see Kim, perfect.
Hi, sorry, I apologize. It was trying to go in through the State Board of Ed account, which I am no longer in. So,
No worries. Okay, it's 11:03 and I will call the meeting to order. The first item of business is agenda approval and announcements. I'll start with any announcements from board or staff.
Mr. Chair, we do have Tom, Eric, and Eric here from VPIC, and so we would recommend adding one item to the agenda after public comment to have a quick VPIC update.
Okay. Any other announcements from folks? Okay, so can we get a motion to approve the agenda as amended to include the folks from VPEC?
Motion.
We see Will, is there a second? See Kim, all those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, you've approved the agenda. First item of business is approval of minutes of the February meeting. That's February 18th. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? I see Kim. Is there a second? I see Will. Sorry, I don't see everybody on the screen at once. So there's a motion and a second to approve the minutes of February 18th. Is there any discussion needs for changes on that? If not, all in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. All right, we've approved the minutes. We are at public comment. I know that in Zoom, we have Ms. Heyman, who has also submitted a letter that the board has received in their board packet. Bill, it looks like there's nobody in person. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you. So, Ms. Heyman, as I mentioned, the board does have your letter, but we'll recognize you for any additional public comment you'd like to make.
Cool. Thank you, Chair. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Heyman. My official role is I am Senior Planner and Deputy Zoning Administrator for the town of Williston, and I live in Waterbury, Vermont. My letter has two request items for your consideration, and I would like to focus on the first item. So as a backstory, I grew up in Virginia, where I got a bachelor's degree in urban and environmental planning from the University of Virginia. After college, I came up to Vermont and worked for the Green Mountain Club for a season on the Long Trail. After that job ended, I stuck around and in February 2017 was lucky enough to get hired by the town of Williston as entry-level planning technician. So at the time, this was my first professional career-related job. I still had Virginia plates on my car, was living in substandard rental housing, had no idea if I was going to be with this job for more than a year or two. Or long term. And in those first 90 days of employment, I checked the little box for defined contribution. Fast forward, what is exactly 8 years, 2 months, and 8 days? I'm still with the town of Williston with no end in sight. I've been promoted to planner and then senior planner. I now have the title of Deputy Zoning Administrator. Some might call that a demotion, but it is a different responsibility as well, being a zoning administrator. And I have no end in sight with Williston. It's a great community. I love it. Just had a set of bylaw amendments passed where I'll be administering new rules in our historic district. We're working on an awesome new town plan. So I really see no end in sight working for that wonderful community. And I love living and volunteering in Waterbury. So every day, that decision on my election form for a defined contribution, it fills me, frankly, with anxiety and regret. I'm aware that that election form states that the decision is irrevocable, and that was also explained in the illustrative documents that were provided in my onboarding paperwork. I believe at that time, Those were documents provided by Beth Pearson, who was the treasurer at the time. However, it is not clear that such an election of retirement is irrevocable beyond those forms and documents. I'm not aware of any legal source or VMERS rule that establish it is irrevocable. I have had wonderful correspondence with Tim Duggan and others in the retirement office, both email and Teams meetings. However, I would like to respectfully request a written decision from you, the Board of Trustees, on this matter. In statute, there's some language where it talks about the election as being in lieu, but it doesn't actually use the word irrevocable. So I would like a formal decision on this matter by the VMERS Board of Trustees. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tim, anything at this point that you want to add?
Just briefly, I will echo Emily's sentiment that we've had wonderful conversations with Emily. Really appreciate her thoughtfulness and attention to this issue. When we have been discussing it, we did a lot of research on the topic and realized that this is something that is within the legislature's purview. There has been a previous one-time opportunity offered by the legislature. I want to say maybe 2011 timeframe, though Justin could correct me, where this exact sort of thing happened. We see no authority in for the board to make this type of decision, and so appreciating Ms. Heyman's request, we view this matter as legislative in nature.
Okay, so my understanding, it's not on the action item for the agenda. So this is something that the board could choose to take up in the future. That we would have you and certainly Justin bring some specific information to that. And so maybe at the end of the meeting, when we're setting any additions to our May agenda, we can circle back to that and see if there's interest in the board in taking that up. And Tim and Bill, there's one name that I don't recognize in the Zoom list or the Teams list. I assume that everybody in there is staff and there's no other visitors.
Is that Jeremiah?
Yes.
Yes, Jeremiah is our CFO.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Heyman. You're welcome to stick around if you'd like and watch the rest of the show.
Yeah, before I wrap up, I do want to touch on part 2 in my letter. I have been having conversations with my legislators about a legislative amendment to statute. So that's kind of like the part 2 of recognizing that things have to go through state law for a change. However, I do really want to emphasize that 24 VSA 5070A states, participation in a defined contribution plan offered under this section shall be in lieu of participation in any other plan established under this title. Nowhere does that section of statute use the word irrevocable. For comparison, 3 VSA 500 for the state employee system, it does explicitly state that the employee's election is irrevocable. So I've recognized that for a very long time, even through that 2013 amendment, Act 22, for a very long time, it's been administered as irrevocable, but 5070A does not use the word irrevocable. The state and municipal employee systems are managed concurrently in a way, but they fall under different titles of statute. Chapter 125 only uses the word irrevocable 3 times, and it's in reference to an election of the employer of the municipality, not the employee. So I understand shall be in lieu. You can have one or the other. You can't have toes in both. That makes a lot of sense. But shall be in lieu in and of itself does not mean irrevocable. So I believe that it is within the power of you, the board, to make a determination and use your rulemaking authority to make a change without a legislative amendment. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And I think at this point, I know, Tom and Eric, you've got a lot going on, so I'll turn it over to you and give you the floor for a quick update.
All right, thanks for having us. Obviously the markets have been kind of crazy over the past couple weeks. We probably should have sold everything the end of February. I think we were up 7% at that point. So that being said, we have a well-diversified strategy. I think Eric will go into details in regards to where we are today. I think we plan for periods like this, particularly with downturn hedging assets, as well as a large portion in our bond portfolio. So I think we're well prepared for these type of events, but I'll turn it over to Eric to talk about details, and thank you for having us today, and we're here to answer any questions about the portfolio.
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, all. I have with me Katie Green in case there are any really difficult questions this morning. But, Tom mentioned that we have a broadly diversified portfolio. We're long-term investors. We design a strategy that seeks to maximize long-term returns within prudent levels of risk and liquidity. When these market dislocations come along, they're almost never foreseen, especially the magnitude of them. We did expect some jitteriness from coming out of tariffs, but I don't think anybody, especially on the street, expected the magnitude and impact that we saw. Like most disruptions, whether it's tariffs, the tech bubble bursting, the great financial crisis, even if you could see them coming and knew the magnitude of them and were able to position the portfolio ahead of them, that leaves you with another very important decision and exposes you to some significant risk of timing a re-entry into risk assets. So we don't try to reposition ahead of events like this. Rather, we design a portfolio that we understand how it will perform during periods like this. And certainly it is performing like we expected, but we don't try to get too cute and position the portfolio ahead of dislocations. What we have done is allocate 70% of the fund to what we call growth assets. These are things like common stocks. That's about 2/3 of the growth asset bucket. And then illiquid securities like private equity and private credit. That's about 1/3 of the growth bucket. Those illiquid assets have been very protective during this market downturn. While global equities had sold, or US equities had sold off by 10% or more, our private equity and our private market assets did not reprice. They don't reprice daily like stocks do. Some may see that as a shortcoming, that how can companies on Wall Street be worth 10 or 20% less, but not our private market companies? And the answer to that is that our private market managers have the ability to hold these assets through such market volatility and sell them only when the price is right. Also in the growth asset bucket, unlike our peers, we don't have a home country bias in our public equity portfolio. Instead of overweighting US stocks and underweighting European stocks and other non-US stocks, we've essentially taken all global equities at their global market caps. This has been protective of us as well. While for the last 3 months, for example, the S&P 500, a measure of large cap US stocks, is down 8%. Over that similar period, the Europe, Australasia, and the Far East indexes, a measure of developed non-US markets, is up 6%. So our overweights to non-US stocks versus our peers has been protective as well. And then finally, we have 19% of the fund in what we call downturn hedging assets. These are core bonds that are traditionally safe havens. While global stocks or US stocks had sold off by 10% or more, our downturn hedging allocation has been hanging about right around between 0 and down just 1. So the intent of the downturn hedging allocation is not to always be up when stocks are down, but rather to provide liquidity during such market downturns so that we're not forced to sell equities into a declining market. The portfolio, we believe, is working as intended. We estimate that through this morning, we're up about 3% for the fiscal year. We don't have final audited numbers yet. Obviously, this is a preliminary estimate, but based on the performance of the indices in our growth asset and downturn hedging asset buckets, we're probably up around 3% year to date. Not too bad given what we've seen in the equity markets. We don't know where this is headed. We're not going to try to guess where it's headed. Again, we're long-term investors focusing on funding these liabilities that are very long-term in nature as well. Happy to take any questions or give you any other color on anything that's on your mind.
Any questions from board or staff? Seeing none. Thank you for that. Buckle up, and yeah, we're always happy to hear from you all, especially the message of staying calm.
Thank you for having us. And if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out.
Sounds good.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the exemption request from Mr. Morin. I do not think he's in Zoom or Teams, sorry. Or in the room there. Is anyone gonna tell me I'm wrong on that?
He's at 109. And he has not requested access, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I believe we've emailed him a number of times. Last we heard was Thursday last week saying he was planning to attend. And I know Bill just sent a reminder this morning, have not heard back. I'm wondering if it might be the board's pleasure to move along with some other items in the spirit of giving him maximum ability to attend if maybe he's running late.
Yep, I think that works. And so we'll circle back to that agenda item, and we will move on to the appointment of Dr. Roos. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, to the Medical Review Board.
You are. Dr. Roos, I am extremely pleased with this agenda item. It has been over a year since we have been, gosh, I want to say probably over 2 years since we've been down to 2 members of our medical review board, of our 3-member medical review board. These are the people that make the determinations about requests for disability retirement. We've been advertising frequently in the Vermont Medical Society's newsletter, and happily, a couple weeks ago, the right person happened to be looking at the right page of the right document at the right time. And Mr. Roos, Dr. Roos, reached out to us. He's a recent retiree from practice over in the Kingdom at Northeast Regional Hospital. He has started his retirement recently, still picks up a few shifts over at the hospital as a hospitalist. And he has also started working for the Social Security Administration doing disability retirement applications. So not only does this doctor fill a really needed spot on our medical review board, he also brings some very germane experience with his work in the Social Security Administration. So when we met him a couple weeks ago, seemed like a very pleasant, wonderful individual to work with, comes very highly recommended from folks who I've spoken with. So staff would recommend to the board an appointment of Dr. Roos to the Medical Review Board for a term of 2 years. Happy to answer any questions.
And seeing no questions. Oh, go ahead, Kim. All
I was just going to so move.
right, there's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I see a second by Mike. Motion to appoint Dr. Roos to the 2-year term for the Medical Review Board. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, thank you. And so we'll stay on Tim with a brief update to the Retirement Health Savings Plan.
Thank you. And if it's okay, I will share my screen.
Yes.
Is everyone seeing this?
Yep.
Great. So the Municipal Retirement Health Savings Plan, this is something that we haven't talked about a lot, and it occurred to me that we should do some refreshing on what the plan is, how long it's been in effect, how many members does it cover, why is it what it is. And so I am still working with our plan administrator, Optum, to potentially join us at our person meeting. And I thought in that spirit, it would help to just do an overview of the plan and provide that background. So I'm still haven't nailed that down 100% yet, that they'll be able to attend, but that is a goal we're working toward. So what is it? This plan is an HRA that holds and invests funds for certain members. It's not available for all members. It is only available for those members for whom it has been funded. And the authority under which the board moved to create this plan is cited here on this slide. So how did it come about? In the early to mid 2000s, we were in the enviable position of being overfunded. So that means we were north of 100% funded, I think north of 102. And it's kind of crazy to be thinking in these terms, but the board was looking for something to do with the excess funds. And given that the VMERS retirees do not have the same type of health insurance plan that state workers and teachers do, the idea was to provide some modest benefit with some of these excess funds. So in 2007, this plan was established, and it was funded with an initial $5 million. And it went to folks who were active, deferred, or retired at the time. So if you came in after this time, you don't have a MHRS account. It was only because these are pre-funded accounts. They could only be created for the people who were there at the time. Overfunded again in 2008, so there was another round of funding, and some additional members were included because we had new folks in that year. So there's a total of 5,090 people that were initially, after 2008, put into the MHRS plan. I'm sure that date is a familiar one to you. It was around the time of the Great Financial Crisis, and our overfunded position evaporated quickly. And so there have been no subsequent fundings made to this plan. And so you really had to be a member back in the 2007, 2008 time frame to have this account. And more specifically, who was it? It wasn't for someone who just joined the system in 2007. You had to have 5 years of service at the end of the fiscal year in which the funding was made. You had to be an active, deferred, or retired member. And then once you are funded, there are ways that you can lose access to the system. For example, if you withdraw from the system, or if you pass away while an active member, then you will not have, or your beneficiary will not have this benefit when they are of retirement age. In that case, funds are forfeited back to the plan, and we use those funds to pay our fees. So members don't have to pay ongoing fees for this plan. These forfeitures are sufficient, more than sufficient, to fund the plan costs. And I'm not sure who may have been on the board, but I have a recollection of this from many years ago. When we moved to Prudential, this plan was being administered by ICMA prior to that. And the two fundings were made into two different types of account. The universal account, that can cover medical expenses as well as insurance premiums. Another funding was made to a medical premium reimbursement account, and that you can't fund medical expenses from that account. So if I have a medical expense, I can't use it to pay that. I can only use it to pay for insurance premiums. Why those different funding methods, I can't answer that, having not been around in the late 2000s. where this came up was during the transition to Prudential. These two buckets were combined into one. And that was early in my tenure here. I remember doing a lot of work with Prudential at the time to try and figure out how to address that, because there are tax consequences to being in these different accounts. They are different because of IRS requirements. So we worked at length with outside counsel to figure out what to do. And at the end of the day, it was determined that it would be okay if we could just keep these both in the universal account, providing maximum flexibility to our members, which ultimately is a good thing. Here we have, and I appreciate Bill's work on this. I wanted to just do some history on who has administered this plan for us over the years. And so you see, Prudential never really administered the plan. They outsourced it because they wanted the full book of business for our 457 plans, 403B plans. When we went out to bid, we asked for an administrator to take all of the plans. And so Prudential, when they took this book of business, they outsourced it to Connect Your Care and BPAS. That structure persisted when Empower acquired Prudential. However, when Empower cut over to a new platform, they had made a business decision that they were exiting the healthcare plan space. And so we had to restructure it to Optum being the lead participant. So that's the structure we have right now. BPAS has always managed the funds, and they're just invested in typical target date funds. And Optum processes claims and manages the relationship overall at present. And I also wanted to just give a history of the fees. The middle entry will probably stand out to you because it's wildly off. The history here is that when Prudential made its bid, they had a data entry error. I think their intent was to have a $36 per member fee, but they put the decimal point in the wrong place. And then a former treasurer held them to that erroneous bid for the initial 5-year term. So that was wildly out of market, but we were able to get the benefit of that for 5 years. It also resulted in what is a very substantial increase when we went over to Optum. You may recall we did do a public bid process there, and Optum was the best bid. So our current fees are substantially more than they were with Prudential. However, during that time with Prudential, we accrued a substantial balance in our plan expense account, and that is enabling us to continue to pay for these the expenses related to this fund, and we in fact have more than we need to pay for these fees for some time into the future. So I just wanted to kind of that takes us up to current state, and per the last report in December, we have 3,400 participants. So it's down a couple thousand from its peak, and you'll notice too, because our funds are invested, they still remain greater than the initial funding amount back in 2008, 2009. Many, and a third of our accounts, these folks are still active, so the funds aren't accessible to them. So I really just wanted to provide that background because I'd like to start doing some better reporting on this, and we're working with Optum in our new relationship to develop some kind of quarterly or twice a year reporting structure. But before doing that, I wanted to level set with the board a little bit and just provide an update on this plan, what it is, take any questions you might have.
Board members have any questions? Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, so Tim, so nobody news coming into this. What's the long-term horizon look like for the overall program?
I mean, this will be a diminishing program, but that is still in the very much in the long term. When you think about 36% of our membership in this plan are active employees, so they still have, they have to wait till retirement to access these funds, and then to the extent they have a spouse that survives them, that spouse can have access to these funds. So it is a plan that we think will be around for some time, unless unless the board would make some kind of other decision, though I don't know what that decision would look like, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
It would be great if you could go back in time to the mid 2000s and say, yeah, you're overfunded at the moment, but change is coming. Thinking about the conversations we had with Siegel in the 8 or 12 years now of rate increases that we've had to put in place. Definitely would have bought us some of that.
I will say in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be attending a webinar with one of our associations about starting to think about overfunding. We are not there, and we won't be there for some time, but it is something to start planning for, because it's a goal that we all have and that we're marching toward. And there are some trickier questions that get raised, like, what this plan illustrates. When how do you think of a plan when it's you don't want to be too overfunded, but so anyway, that is with the nationwide funding ratios are increasing. And so these topics are becoming more a topic of conversation in the industry. I'm actually really looking forward to hearing. I think it's not our actuaries from Siegel, but a couple others that are going to be presenting this webinar.
Okay, thanks. And I think we'll go to the anything else you want to highlight on the director's update, Tim? I know you hit on a lot of things there, and you also sent some training information separately.
Yeah, just a couple of things that I'll highlight. We have secured RVK to oversee, provide governance, consulting, and investment services for our supplemental plans. They are, we just had our onboarding meeting yesterday, and we're really looking forward to moving forward with the work. You met them when we did the one-time look at all of our plans before. We thought there was great value in bringing these folks on in a ongoing capacity. One thing we've talked about, and I'll bring it to the board if we decide to move forward, they are not providing these services for the municipal RHS plan, but it may be that we want to have them take at least a one-time look at those as well. We're starting our conversations about that. And if that does look to be like something that's interesting or that would provide value, we'll certainly bring it to you and let you know what our thinking is on that before moving forward. And I also just wanted to put a plug on the backside of our server migration. 2 weekends ago, we moved over to our hosted environment for our pension administration system from our on-prem system. That is always a terrifying thing to write in advance of the migration to flag to my board that we're doing a big tech migration. Fortunately, under Nicole's leadership, that went very well. These couple of weeks, we've been working through little onesie twosie kind of technical issues that come up. The system might be timing out or an access isn't there. So we're working through those little items that I would expect with any type of migration like this, but it went really well. And I really did just want to highlight the great work of Nicole on spearheading that migration. The only other thing I wanted to highlight to folks is the May meeting. We are hoping to have that in person. Bill put some initial information together for you. We're still diving into a couple other things, trying to make sure we have some good guidance for you for any expenses, travel expenses for anyone who's coming this way. And we're trying to see if we can't get some additional parking flexibility from our friends in state government. So we're going to have another update coming around to folks. What we'd ask is that you let Bill know in advance if you're coming. We're going to get lunch at noon on the VMERS on the 7th. So we would love to have you here for lunch. We'll have Siegel, RVK, and Empower in person. We think it'll be a great time for folks to just meet some of our key vendors and have an opportunity to talk to each other. This board's never been in together physically at once. So if you can make it, that's great. If you can't, we will have a remote option available for you.
Yeah, I'll just say to folks in the director's update, there's a link that you can click to RSVP to the meeting. So just please do that when you can.
That's all I have.
Okay.
Happy to answer your questions.
So you also had the training opportunities. I do note that you can't go to the one in Hawaii until you do the prerequisite, and the prerequisite is actually after the one in Hawaii. So,
and while we put that,
no one's going to Hawaii.
While we put that in the spirit of comprehensiveness, we would probably recommend that Hawaii is not the best choice for a training.
Okay. Any questions for Tim on the director's update? Right. Well, I guess we're going to circle back to the Morin request. Still don't see anybody new online or in the room.
Bill, Justin, have you heard anything?
No, I'll just double check here.
So at this point, I'll look to Justin to see if he has any guidance on this. But having been duly warned, and I know I did get a response from Mr. Morin that he was aware of the time. I think we could move forward. But Justin, please feel free to let me know what you think.
Yeah, it's a bit of the board's prerogative, but certainly an abundance of notice and communications confirming attendance are here. You certainly have the request submitted in writing in the board materials. So I think if the board wanted, we could certainly, I would suggest entering executive session to receive legal advice from counsel. There's a motion to that effect if the board would like to head down that route.
What's the pleasure of the board? Are we good moving forward on this?
I'll move to go into executive session to get advice from counsel.
And because it's a specific two-parter, could I potentially read it to guide the board just for the clarity of the minutes?
Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry to jump in. It's a two-part. This is two separate motions just for everyone's knowledge. Motion one is move that the board find that premature general public knowledge of information concerning Mr. Morin's VMERS withdrawal request would clearly place the board at a substantial disadvantage.
John has made that motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Kim. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, and Justin, the second motion.
Based upon that finding, move that the board go into executive session to receive confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the body pursuant to 1 VSA section 313 A1F.
I'll move that.
John moves, Kim seconds that motion. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Well, any opposed? All right, so we will enter executive session. Tim and Bill, I will leave it to you to manage the teams.
Sure,
and who needs to be in and who needs to be out.
Emily, would you like to be invited back via call when they exit executive session? The only remaining thing after this is any other business come before the board.
Yep, that sounds good. So would you like me
Okay.
to jump off and then you'll shoot me an email?
Yeah, that can work. Absolutely.
Okay, sounds good. All right, see you in a few.
Thank you.